Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Sheila Jackson Lee, who from here on will be called just Sheila Lee — I don't call people by their full name unless I respect them, and I don't respect her — she has predictably lost her bid to become the next mayor of Houston. She lost the election by only 60,000 votes, and I say only 60,000 because Houston is a city of millions of people. Yet with voter turnout this small, that tells you that a lot of people in Houston stayed home, particularly the black vote. Gee, what could have possibly gone wrong? I mean, Sheila Lee is supposed to be the absolute queen of turnout, right? She's part of the Congressional Black Caucus, so she's got her finger to the pulse of the people, doesn't she? The black vote in Houston alone could have given her a clear majority, and she could have won easily if black Houstonians were motivated to go to the polls, but they weren't, because Sheila Lee doesn't inspire anyone. Last month, it was the gubernatorial race in Louisiana where a Republican won, but should not have been able to, actually. And now it's happened in Houston. And this is particularly important because, of course, Houston and Louisiana are connected by Interstate 10. That is a direct connection between Houston, Texas, and New Orleans, Louisiana. Two large black population centers. So what does this tell us? All of the years and years, which now amount to decades of doing nothing for black people, the bill is starting to come due. And her empty, pathetic lip service about reparations, that ain't fooling anybody. See, this is part of the problem that these little bootlicks have. Just like with Bloomberg, they operate out of the same playbook. Whenever they get to have their little voting districts that many of them drew up so they could choose their own voters, people most likely to vote for them, they're safe. But as soon as they try to go outside of that, like Kamala Harris when she decided to run her election outside of the cozy confines of the California political machine, that's when they run into pure hell. That's when they go down in flames. And all the little BS talking points that they usually use, all of the little so-called make-good gestures that they think were earning them so many PR points, they find out it earned them absolutely nothing. Nobody cares what Sheila Jackson Lee said about reparations. They only care what does she actually do. A little bit of part-time mention of it, that ain't hitting on nothing. People could see right through it because they listen to the new voices of black media. That's why. These bootlicks look at themselves as honorary members of the oppressor class, so as they see it, those political offices are their birthright, their private property. They see the world the same way that their white supremacist paymasters do, and they think of themselves the same way when they're not. You see, the white supremacist leaders of both political parties, they have a heck of a lot more money and a heck of a lot more political and social cushion to insulate them against what would ordinarily be the instant consequences of displeasing the black electorate. But these bootlicks, they don't have that kind of insulation. When you look at the planks of Sheila Lee's political platform, if it could be called that, you see it was just the same old congressional black talking points that they got from the DNC leadership. She's going to fight for amnesty for illegal aliens, for abortion on demand at any time under any circumstances, and of course for LGBT issues. You got a black woman who's old as dirt, and here she is running on a platform of what she's going to do for everyone except for black people. No wonder black folks didn't turn out to vote. There was nothing on the ballot for them. She has no one to blame but herself. What does she offer to black people? Nothing. What has Sheila Lee done in all her time in Congress? She thought she was going to do the same thing as Karen Bass in Los Angeles. We've talked about her a number of times. And yes, we will get to Sylvester Turner in just a moment. But this is the playbook that these bootlicks are trying to pursue. This is what happens whenever the highest echelons of the political parties are pretty much spoken for. You got to try to get yourself into the pipeline somehow. I mean, you want to be sitting around with the same old congressional parking spot forever? No. We got to find a way to get to the Senate if we can. And if you don't have an instantaneous way to get there now, well, you got to work your way up through state politics. Try to enhance and magnify your profile there. Go for an office that has a larger constituency than just a regular congressional seat. If the Senate seats in your state are already on lock, then try to find out if you can become mayor of the largest city in your state. Hopefully that will get you to be next in line. See, Sheila Lee thought that she was going to become mayor of the nation's fourth largest city and from there senator or governor or something of that like. In a state like Texas, though, that's stupid talk, but that's the way these bootlicks think. They still haven't figured out that the only reason Kamala Harris is VP today is because the California political machine selected her years ago when she was low-down Willie Brown's pet floozy. They already had it planned out way in advance exactly how they would get her to D.C. First as DA of Alameda County, then San Francisco, then Attorney General of the state of California, then the Senate, then Vice President. Kamala Harris doesn't have the smarts or charisma to get anywhere on her own. She proved that with her own humiliatingly inept presidential campaign. That's why she had to be elevated. And the other bootlicks figure that if they can get in the good graces of the white powers that be, they'll get the same treatment. Some people never learn, but as the bootlicks see it, they know what their real job is. They know what the service is that they're providing for their political masters, which is to control black people and show that they can corral all of these unruly Negroes. These bootlicks, as they see it, they don't have to offer us anything, just like their white counterparts never offer us anything. Why, all the bootlick has to do is just be black, and we won't expect or demand anything. And yes, that was true for a very long time. Too long, in fact. But we're starting to see some examples now of how it's certainly not good enough for at least a number of black people. This defeat that was handed to Sheila Lee was the cumulative effect of all these self-serving political prostitutes, including Mayor Sylvester Turner. I told you time and time again that when Mike Bloomberg was running for president, he needed some Negroes to be his crash dummies, to be his human shields, to ward off any accusations of racism due to his stop and frisk policy and all the racist stuff that Bloomberg said and did when he was mayor of New York. Now, when he was running around having his Blacks for Bloomberg rallies, he had pet Negroes like Sylvester Turner of Houston standing on the podium with him and saying, "Oh, vote for our buddy Mike Bloomberg." Sylvester Turner took part in that betrayal. Sylvester Turner indeed. His name ought to be Sylvester Turncoat, because that's what he actually is. This is part of the process of breaking these bootlicks. Any politician who tries to avoid saying the word black, who makes excuses for policies and politicians who have harmed the black community, any of them who refuse to say what they will do specifically for us, should never be able to get our vote. Period. The black vote must go through a disciplining process, and conditioning our people on how to vote when it's in our interest and to withhold our vote when it is not is a key element of that disciplining process. The black baby boomers allowed the word black to become a dirty word in American politics, and they kept allowing these anti-black racists, particularly on the left, to get into political office and to keep getting back into office with our vote, and without having to acknowledge our existence, much less do anything for us. No, actually what the baby boomers did was far worse than that. We gave them our vote even though they insulted us to our faces. We let them tell us that they're not going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No! And then voted for them anyway. Negroes like Sheila Lee did a sit-in on the floor of the House of Representatives to protest a mass shooting at an LGBT nightclub. Meanwhile, there was a massacre in a black church in Charleston, another massacre at a grocery store in Buffalo, and yet another mass murder of black people in Florida. And the Congressional Black Caucus posted a Twitter tweet, and that was it. They supported and voted for an Asian hate crime law, but are doing absolutely nothing to demand one for us, and we're the ones who need it the most. These are not failures on the part of the black misleadership class. This is the black bootlick class doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, serving the interests of white supremacy by getting you and me to sit on our hands and do nothing and wait for them to produce results. Their failure is intentional. Dr. Claude Anderson said that we have to understand that we have been abandoned by the so-called political class in the black community. Look at Karen Bass for an excellent example of that. Look at that clown down in Birmingham, Stephen Reed, for another example. He was boldly bragging that he didn't need the black vote. All he needed was the white vote and just a small handful of black ones. These are not accidents that they don't do anything for us. What the white media tries to call the black political class are in fact nothing more than paid political harlots. They were handpicked by our oppressors. We had nothing to do with choosing them or elevating them or putting them in office. White power made that decision. But we have to take responsibility for not voting them back into office, because without us, they're not going anywhere. That's why they constantly try to invoke the civil rights movement and link their own putrid names to it. They try to ride the coattails of people far better than themselves. They talk about people dying for our right to vote, yes. And we put these do-nothing morons in office like Sheila Lee. And what have they done to get justice for all those people who were murdered for our right to vote? Emmett Till's murderer was allowed to be on the loose for decades, free since the 1950s. And that heifer died free as a bird because the black leadership class could care less. They know that a lot of people in both parties were involved in the racial atrocities of the 20th century. Joe Biden himself bragged about how he first got into the Senate in the early 70s and was mentored by Southern segregationists. Joe Biden was and remains proud of that fact. Family, the real riders of the civil rights movement were mostly killed during the 60s and 70s. We need to own up to that fact. The ones who we see running around today talking about it, these were the cowards and sellouts. People like John Lewis used the movement as a means of gaining clout for themselves. And there's also another fact that we need to be honest about, family. A lot of those Negroes who were so eager to jump in front of the cameras in the 60s were nothing more than self-promoting social climbers. And we see the same thing today with people like D. Ray McKesson and Tarana Burke and those two chuckleheads down in Memphis who decided to disrupt the state legislature. We still see it today, and we saw the same thing back then. Negroes who couldn't wait to get some face time with the white media and use the civil rights movement as a springboard to a life of comfort and wealth for themselves and their own family members. James Clyburn is a disgrace to humanity, and yet he's made out like a bandit because of simple-minded Negroes in South Carolina who keep voting for him, and they literally do it for a plate of fish. I wish I was making that up. Plantation politics at its lowest. Well, that's the reason why we do what we do. The fight to dislodge these traitors has to start somewhere, and we're doing the work. But it's not enough to get these bootlicks out of office. We have to replace them with candidates who we choose, people who we know are solid as a rock and unapologetically about black empowerment. People who understand that black isn't a dirty word in politics and will not be treated that way. People who understand that black must be on the ballot, and if it's not, then that ballot is illegitimate. People don't like that. Tough. We have always accomplished the most when we stopped caring what anyone else thought. People didn't like seeing the chains of chattel slavery broken. We didn't care what they thought about that. People didn't like seeing us putting an end to Jim Crow. We didn't care about that. People didn't like the uprisings of the 1960s. We didn't care. People didn't like the uprisings of 2020. We didn't care. Things change when we stop caring about what people think. This is not a popularity contest. Power is not about putting your finger to the wind to see which way it's blowing today, or to make sure that everybody is perfectly pleased with you. Power is about getting yours. And that's the only thing that matters. Sure, there's going to be others who don't like it, but that's fine. We never ask them to like it. We've had all kinds of stuff being done to us. We've been systematically ignored. We've had policies put in place to make sure that others are catapulted and leapfrogged over us. And the very ones who have benefited from us and from our struggle then turn around and tell us that they work harder than we do and there's something wrong with us. It's time to pull the plug on that nonsense. These people we have running around, they are not leaders. They are professional BS artists. They do like their white counterparts in the Democratic Party, and they try to talk us to death and use weasel words and try to bluff their way past us. You have to vote for us, they say. It's too dangerous to let Trump become president. Well, Trump did become president. And that was actually one of the best things that could have happened to us because people finally had to face up to the reality of white supremacy that threatens us. They couldn't ignore the anti-black racism anymore because you had an unrepentant bigot in the White House. We had someone who was an honest racist. See, the problem has never really been the white supremacists per se. The problem has been that the people who need to be fighting them aren't. Everybody wants to hide their heads in the sand. Or better yet, sit on their hands and wait to see if the Democrats or somebody else is going to do something about these white supremacists. When Joe Biden and the rest of these Democrats, they were mentored by these white supremacists. They're flip sides of the exact same coin. It's like professional wrestling. They pretend to actually fight each other when in reality, we're the marks. Well, I don't know about you, but over here in Black Empowerment, we're nobody's fool. Because as soon as Biden became president, everybody went back to sleep. They stopped fighting because they believed the Democrats' weasel words that Biden was going to do something. All you Negroes who said that Trump had to go and that Trump's too dangerous to be in office, you took the pressure off the Democrats. Black people were scared 3 years ago. That's why they turned out to vote for Biden, not because they wanted to, because they were scared of a second Trump term. But as I told you 3 years ago, that whole, if Trump remains in office, it'll be the apocalypse line they were doing, all that fear-mongering they did 3 years ago, I told you the day that Biden won election, that this was a trick the Democrats would only get to pull once. And looking at the current polls, which show Trump neck and neck with Biden, some polls show Trump ahead of Biden, all the current scaremongering they're doing about a fascist takeover being imminent if Trump wins next year, it's not working. People waited to see what the Democrats would do. and the Democrats show that they weren't going to do much. Black people waited to see what the Democrats would do, and they haven't done anything at all. Democrats know what they have to do to get the black support they need, and if this alleged threat of a fascist takeover by Trump is true, if they actually mean it, then it should be a no-brainer for them to do the right thing and agree to our demands. But they won't. See, the dilemma for them is not, how do we protect the country from Trump? The dilemma for them is, how do we get into office and make sure we still have these Negroes voting for us for nothing? They're not scared at all. They just want to hold on to power. Democrats had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House for the first 2 years of Biden's administration. And what do they do with it? They produce things for everyone else except for us. An Asian hate crime law, a federal gay marriage law, but they claim that that had something to do with interracial marriage, and they made sure to mention black people every time they said it. At this point, Biden has no credibility. He made a lot of promises for policies that he said he would enact if he was elected president in 2020. He talked about a White House-level police accountability commission, a so-called Lift Every Voice plan, whatever that was, a police reform bill, and what did he actually do when he got into office? He reneged on all of it. Before he even took office, as soon as he won election, he was already saying that whole police accountability commission in the White House, he said, I ain't doing that. Congress needs to handle that one, which of course resulted in nothing happening because that was the plan from the beginning. And the rest of his phony promises, he simply said nothing about it, and none of the sellouts in the CBC have even said boo about this complete and thorough abandonment of the clearly empty policies that he was talking about. Even the do-nothing empty rhetoric of the 2020 campaign, even that was too much for Biden to do, and too much for the CBC to say anything about. Down in Florida, you had that scumbag, Jacoby Pittman, who castigated a black crowd of protesters who were protesting Ron DeSantis, who encouraged a mass murder. And what did this woman do? She said, we gonna get this party started. This piece of trash is in Congress. Now I want to know who in the CBC called Jacoby Pittman out for that. Who in the CBC has demanded that she resign? See, the other caucuses in Congress, they would never allow something like that to happen. But then again, they're genuine representatives of their constituencies. They're not hand-picked tools. So, what's Sheila Lee's next move going to be? Well, she's already filed paperwork to run for re-election for the House. I love when the white media says her House seat, because, it belongs to her. It's her personal family heirloom, I suppose. So her plan B from the very beginning was always go back to Washington. I mean, what else does she have? Wouldn't it be something, though, if the same voters who refused to back her for mayor this year also decided not to support her for Congress again, too? Because as Sheila Lee found out the hard way, when people stay home, they're still casting a ballot. Only it's a vote of no confidence. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Precious Jenkins, Elaine Zanga, Chevalier Foster, Roxanne Allen, and Darren Nooks. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.